Chapter 8 of The Mystery of Pain. Recording by Ethan D. Gilkey. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. But still this question remains. If the good of human life is found in that which we feel is painful, should we not seek pain rather than pleasure? Would not the acceptance of this idea lead us to the arbitrary choice of suffering, to the willful giving up of all that makes us joyous, the abrogation of the sanctities of home, the deliberate extinction of all that civilizes? Though this question is naturally suggested by the thoughts which precede, nothing can be farther from their real spirit. It is because the things in which we find suffering are the sole condition of a full and perfect happiness that they are good. It is because life ought to be joyful that we have claimed this place as joy-giver for sorrow. Pain is evil. It marks and is the token of disease. It bespeaks want and loss. Thinking thus, we do not seek pain. We do not seek even to be resigned to it. We seek its utter destruction, the doing away all possibility even of its presence. Our hearts are avaricious, rather, of delight, and refuse to be satisfied with anything less than the utmost that we can receive. For, evidently, it is an entirely different thing to say, sacrifice is the good, and to say, pain is good. The association of pain with sacrifice, as we have seen, nay, as we know so well by experiences, happily, we may believe, becoming more familiar in human life, is unnecessary and partial, not constant and inevitable. The true affinities of sacrifice are with pleasure, with rapture even. It is only by evil or want within that sacrifice can be otherwise than glad. To dwell with joy, with deliberate choice on sacrifice, even to refuse to all else the rightful name of good, is not to praise or to sanction pain, but to affirm emphatically that it ought not be, nay, that it ought not to be possible, that to which it has attached itself, the very root from which it seems to grow, though not, in truth, does it grow from that root, but from quite another, and it is fateful error which thus mistakes its source, should yield the opposite. There should be no pain to man. From him, as he should be, sorrow and sighing should flee away, but not by the taking away of sacrifice. If there be any difficulty felt here, the source of it will become quite manifest by recalling the illustration of sickness. Let us conceive again a sick man saying, "Alas, all motion of my limbs, all attempt to take exercise is an intolerable pain to me. I cannot endure it." And that the reply was made to him, "Courage, my dear friend. Do not let yourself think of that as painful in itself, though it is exquisite and unendurable torture to you. That is the secret of the strong man's pleasure, and you shall come to have perfect, and now almost inconceivable delight in it. Do not let yourself confuse the poor comfort, necessary as it may be to you, of sinking on your bed and lying still, with the true enjoyments of man." Would this reply be thought a praise and recommendation of pain, or to advise the wilful choice of it? Surely not. It would simply be to encourage the sick man to keep his standard of pleasure high enough, and to not let it be degraded by his perverted feeling. It is, in this respect, precisely the same thing when we rebuke ourselves for our false thoughts and urge upon ourselves to recognize that, in the experience of suffering and loss which we feel even as unendurable distress, we must look for, and shall find, the source of joy. In another way, the true relations of this thought respecting pain may be illustrated. Let it be assumed that our object is joy, that this is the good at which we aim. Now here is in our life this fact of sacrifice, of individual suffering, opposing and preventing its perfect attainment, hurting, harming, often rendering joy impossible. Whence and what is the remedy to be? How is the hurtful thing to be rendered harmless, the mischief to be neutralized? Our whole knowledge of nature and our life concur in giving one answer. It must be turned to use. Things cease to hurt us then, and then only permanently, when they are made to serve our good. nor can it be otherwise, for nothing can be annihilated, nothing hindered from having, in some form or another, its full effect. The mere putting away or putting down evils has never succeeded. They return with a violence increased by the delay. The one condition upon which we can really avoid suffering by hurtful things is, that we should use them and make them serve us. A striking instance, though it is but an instance of a universal law, is given by the problem with which every large body of persons has to strive, of disposing of waste materials of their life. Hurtful to a high degree, these waste materials are the source of inevitable disease if they are not put utterly away. How thus utterly put them away? There must be one method that is truly efficient, and that is, to make them subservient to the increase of the means of life, to render them the fertilizers of the lands, the source of food. The drainage of towns will either poison or be an enormous task, or it will feed. The condition of the ceasing to be evil is that it shall become a good. Necessarily it is so. Its effects cannot be made null. Our only choice is, shall they work our mischief or our benefit? Now to point out that the noxious materials of our bodily life are in themselves a source of good, is not to encourage men to accept, or to deter them from removing, their ill effects. It is to open the path of their removal, and to stimulate the work. It substitutes for the futile efforts at escape or suppression the rational plan of use. It is such a change as this that would ensue in our practical life from the acceptance of the thought that sacrifice is the source of joy, and that it is associated with pain to us only by the want that is in ourselves. It would never prompt us to seek pain, never lead us to choose it for its own sake, never lead us to undervalue joy. It would make enjoyment more sacred in our eyes, would raise it to a holy significance, making it teach us lessons beyond ourselves. It is an image, feeble, partial, and too small though it be, of which should be, in its perfection, universal in our life. It carries on our thoughts to a higher joy that should never be absent, being fullest in the portions of our lives whence all joy now is banished. But further, this view not only guards us from the arbitrary choice of pain, it enables us to trace how that abuse arose, and whence sprang the ascetic and self-denying spirit, which, while not without its grandeur, has inflicted so many injuries on men. Mankind have always recognized a goodness in things that are painful. In no time or place has the feeling been wholly absent, but they have not always understood the reason. It was not recognized that these things are good only because they are sacrifice, and subserve others' welfare, and therefore are the true source of gladness. That they are good in a familiar and human sense, because they are adapted to give joy. Hence men unavoidably mistook, and attributed the goodness that they could not but recognize in them to that which is emphatically not good, to that which is the sign of our own evil, the pain that was connected to them. They ascribed to pain the goodness which belongs to sacrifice as the giver, above all things, of joy. A strange and yet inevitable aversion of the thought, while the afflictions had not yet fully recognized the joy that is in sacrifice, nor faith apprehended the relation of all human life to the unseen work that God does in man. It was thus asceticism that rose, seeking pain as good, self-denial as an end, and thus it failed. But the lesson it teaches remains for us. There is a good in that which we find painful. The human soul does not recognize it, nor can luxury, nor scorn, nor the history of innumerable ills wrought by pursuing pain prevent. Man's soul recurs to it in spite of experience, in spite of enlightenment, in spite of ease. Surely one thing alone can cure asceticism of its error, and free mankind of its dangers. That is, to recognize the true nature of good that is in sacrifice, that it is good, not for itself, nor because it involves pain, but precisely because it is not for itself, and it is the true root of pleasure. If this can be recognized, asceticism cannot gain a rise to distort life and tax humanity beyond its powers. The elements of our nature in which it has its roots are turned into another channel, and find their satisfaction in deeds animated by another spirit. A perfect guide, indeed, is given us thus in respect to the acts of sacrifice we should or should not undertake. Only that painful thing is good which has in it the root of pleasure, and this is that alone which serves others' good. Therefore no arbitrary, self-chosen sacrifice is good. There is no source of joy in that. It fails of the first condition. Only that sacrifice is good which either we accept for another's sake, ourselves seeing and choosing the result, or that which serves a like end unseen by us, and surely better serves a better end, being in God's hands and not ours. For seen or unseen sacrifice is good, but only when it is for service. And this service either we accomplish for ourselves, or God works for us. We accomplish it when we consciously act from love or duty, and are blessed in witnessing the service rendered. But God works it for us when He inflicts on us pain or losses, that is, when necessity enforces them, or right commands. In these He is our minister, our steward, to bestow better than what we could do the service of our love. In sacrifices that we cannot escape, that come from providence or deeds of men who are in God's instruments, and in sacrifices for which He calls in duty, we recognize His hand, and we know that they are used by Him. We feel our hearts glowing with the delight that humility does not forbid. In this the Lord hath need of us. So far He uses and blesses us, undertaking Himself to be the dispenser of our gifts. The best in life, then, reading it by faith, as seeing the invisible, which not to do is blindness and self-chosen error. The best in life is that part of it wherein there is inflicted on us, or rather accepted from us, the inevitable sacrifice. It is in the losses that we cannot escape, the pains that God calls on us to bear, bafflings from which no effort can set us free, no uprightness deliver, or in that part of it wherein the voice of duty bids us incur loss or pain, or leave unacted the deeds that would delight us most. These things are the best in life, for these are God using us. These are His taking our poor services, poor at best, though they may be great to us, and Himself using them in ways too good, too deep and wide for us to see. These are our contribution to the redemption of the world, felt as painful because the sources of joy too great, which we make our own by freely yielding and accepting them, thus making God's deed ours. Must not this be the best in life, the highest privilege? We can link our weakness with omnipotence, our blindness with omniscience. This is the privilege of the destitute, the sick, the feeble, of those who are thwarted and cast down, who cannot save themselves. Behold, to them it is given to save others. Next to this privilege in goodness, among the things that our life can offer us, come the sacrifices we can bear willingly for the good of others. Less good, indeed, but seeming more to us as a good we can see and consciously subserve. These are the portions of our life that rise to the level of true goodness. Each yields us joy in proportion to our love, the greatest privilege demanding for its joy, even because it is the greatest, faith as well as love. Besides these, and separated from them by an immeasurable interval, these are the pleasures which are not of sacrifice, the pleasures of mere enjoyment, not truly good, yet not without their value. These are the portions of our life that cannot be employed for their best use, that our disability compels us to have unturned to their true account, the alleviations which our sickness needs, and must now bow itself to accept. There, then, in this respect, three elements in our life. First, the perfect good, which comes to us in the form of providential and inevitable sacrifice, or the loss that right demands, on the full gladness of which we enter by faith, knowing in our hearts that which we cannot see. Next, there is the good, less, but still great and worthy of our manhood, the serving others consciously, and of our own free will, for ends within our sight, the joy of which is in proportion to our love. In this is included all honest and unselfish work, And lastly, there are pleasures we can gain for ourselves, the satisfaction of an individual kind, with which our life is so abundantly surrounded. These last mark our feebleness and want, but they are needful for us, and our enjoyment of them is essential. In so far as they give us joy, they are types and reflections of perfect life, though in a negative and inverse form. We understand their nature if we look on them like the reliefs and perverted pleasures which the sick man demands, not good, but to us necessary, and by us felt as good. This necessity and this feeling mark our disability, our need of the restored and perfect life. Thus we see from another point of view the error of asceticism. The attempt to render man independent of self-enjoyment is an ignoring of his disease. It is an attempt to act as if in health while health is wanting to us. It is not only our right, it is our duty to enjoy and to be happy. This is evident on all grounds. It is fitting to our state, and it is practically right. Pleasure does us good if gratefully and lovingly accepted. The nature often expands and blossoms under it as under no other influence. And suffering oftentimes, not felt as the spring of joy it is, sours, cramps, and hardens. We cannot dispense with joy. We were never meant to dispense with it, but we should seek it rightly. Neither is there any tendency in the thought of sacrifice as our true source of joy to diminish the pleasurableness of that which we may call self-pleasure, or in any way to mar our natural enjoyments. It may, indeed, throw them into the shade, and relax somewhat, would to God it might, the passion of our grasp upon them and pursuit after them. But this is only by bringing them into the presence of another superior pleasure. It is but as the boy less values childish sports as he grows into an appreciation of the serious gratifications of maturity, and sees that they have served his purpose in awakening capacities and calling forth desires that they were never meant to fill. End of Chapter 8 of The Mystery of Pain. Recording by Ethan D. Gilkey.